organization that helps qualified professionals bring their skills and experience to local classrooms via an online teacher certification program. If you have a bachelor's degree, you are pre-qualified to start the program and can be running your own classroom within a year. A representative will be hosting community meetings in your town this month, and you can find out more information by calling 877-669-2228 or visiting abcte.org.
When you want to join the conversation, tune to 1290 WJNO. The following views are those of the host and not those of Clear Channel Broadcasting licenses. Welcome to Caregiver Reality with your host, David Levy. David Levy brings more than 25 years of practical experience helping thousands of family caregivers find solutions to the challenges and frustrations presented by this important responsibility. So if you are in the position of caring for a spouse, a parent, or a loved one who is no longer able to care for him or herself, or if you know someone who is, this hour will be worth the listening. Now, today's edition of Caregiver Reality and your host, David Levy.
Good evening, South Florida, America, and the world. This is the Caregiver Reality Show. I'm your host, David Levy. I'm here with my co-host, Paul Vattiato.
And a good evening, David.
And a good evening to you. We're coming to you live on WBZT, 1230 a.m., and on iHeartRadio.com. Click on Florida and go to BZT. And live and streaming on www.caregiverreality.com. And tonight, we are also on medicalresearchcharities.org, and I want to get to that in just a moment. But, Paul, how you doing?
You know what?
What?
This was a role reversal week for me.
Yeah?
I went from caregiver to patient, and I think I'm a much better caregiver than I am patient.
Right. Paul had a little bit of work done on his eye, but actually I had to punch him to keep him in line.
Yes.
But nonetheless, I want to be able to tell you how pleased we are to announce that we have formed a collaboration with Medical Research Charities. And forgive me if I read a little bit.
What is that all about, David?
All right. Well, what it's all about is we were approached a couple of weeks ago by Medical Research Charities, which is an umbrella organization for 25-plus medical research organizations that run the gamut from prostate cancer, breast cancer, lung cancer, leukemia, all the big diseases. And what they help those organizations do is not only to keep them in the eye of the public over and above what they do, but they are also linked to the federal employee database, so that if federal employees want to donate to a charity, they can pick the disease that they're dealing with or are most aligned with because of something that happened in their past or their present. And so they have grown in size. But one of the things that they recognized was that while they did patient care and while they understood disease research, they really didn't have a family caregiver component. And every one of those diseases and every one of those patients has a family caregiver. And so they came to us and said, would you be interested in helping us organize the caregiver arm of Medical Research Charities? And so we did. Today we actually put together a memorandum of understanding. And so tonight we are up on their website, so you can see us there. And one of the things that I wanted to make mention of is the fact that while they do provide patient information, we will be the spokesperson for caregiving. And one of the ones that's a recent addition to their board is the Alzheimer's Research Center of America. And that is a collaboration with Scripps Research out of La Jolla, California, which
Terrific.
is the original location for Scripps Institute. And so that's a biggie. And so we are thrilled because, we discuss a lot about Alzheimer's in relationship to our family caregivers, and because we see so much of it. So to be able to be a part of helping them get the word out to family caregivers, I am extremely pleased. And we think it'll be very mutually beneficial, and over the next few months you'll see it grow, and we will be doing things in conjunction with those disease-related organizations that I think the American public and our listeners will be very pleased to see. So I'm thrilled with the collaboration, and Paul,
I think
with
that's
your
going to
help.
be great for everyone involved. As our listeners go to do some of the research on some of the diseases that they might be dealing with, what a great collaboration to be able to go to caregiverreality.com for the support they need on the caregiving side and get that first-class information through medical research charities. Just
Right,
awesome.
and I was very honored and pleased that they could have gone a lot of places, but they came to us. So without blowing our horn any further, I just wanted to announce that, and I'll be talking about them in the days going forward. And one of the things that I did promise, I have one of my really good caregivers, Eleanor Lacera, who's in a nursing home, who'll be coming out on Thursday, and she's a great, loyal listener. And so, Eleanor, I just want to wish you well, and hopefully you'll get up those 15 steps when they let you out so you'll be able to get back into your condo. Anyway, Paul, what else we got to talk about now?
Well, David, I know that you've been speaking often about snake oil salesmen and false hopes and false cures. I understand there was some new information that came out recently. Why don't you share with our listeners exactly what the scoop is?
Well, on a number of sites out there, whether they be caregiver sites or medical sites, there's been a product, and it's called Axona, A-X-O-N-A. And it was the subject of one piece of research in 2009 that came out that was done in England. And ostensibly, that research concluded that there may have been something in a certain formulation that would be meaningful to Alzheimer's patients. However, Axona has gone ahead and described themselves as a medical food available by prescription. And very recently, middle of December, the FDA came down on them very, very hard. And because I didn't memorize all of it, there was a warning letter sent to the organization, or the company rather, that produces it. And it says, your Axona product is labeled as a medical food, and the claims on your product label and website represent the product as a medical food intended for the clinical dietary management of metabolic processes associated with moderate Alzheimer's disease. Based on our review, we have determined that Axona is misbranded because the labeling is false and misleading in the product as a medical food. Your website promotes Axona product for the management of this metabolic process associated with mild Alzheimer's disease. However, there is no distinctive nutritional requirement or unique nutriment needs for individuals with mild to moderate Alzheimer's. The therapeutic claims on your product label and website establish that your Axona is a drug because it's intended for use in cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of disease. Furthermore, your product is offered for a condition that is not amenable or easily lends itself to self-diagnosis and treatment by individuals who are not medical practitioners. Therefore, adequate directions for use can't be written so that a layperson can use this drug for its intended purpose. Thus, the drug is misbranded. And lastly, your product is not generally recognized as safe and effective for the above-referenced uses, and therefore the product is a new drug. New drugs may not be legally introduced or delivered for introduction into interstate commerce without prior approval from FDA. So essentially, once again, a number of months back, we talked about a doctor that was injecting people with Enbrel right into their brains or into the back of their neck to go to their brains as a cure for Alzheimer's and multiple sclerosis. Enbrel is a product that is basically used for psoriatic arthritis. And not only did the company that manufactures Enbrel say that there is absolutely nothing that remotely could be used, Enbrel for Alzheimer's, the FDA has now put these people on notice that they cannot continue to market Axona. But yet you will find it on websites. You will find them making claims about its capability within the Alzheimer's world. And once again, this is another example of somebody taking something that had one study behind it and turning it into a product that gives people false hopes. It reminds me very much of a few months back when all the rage for helping the Alzheimer's disease world by using coconut oil.
Yes.
And the only thing that we found that it did after some careful research that we were able to help conduct is that it either gave you diarrhea or it raised your cholesterol level, but it didn't have a darn thing to do with Alzheimer's. So one of the things that the audience needs to be aware of, both here and worldwide, is not everything that you see, even if it's on the internet, makes good sense, or if you really dive into it, and we don't expect you to. We're the ones that do the deep diving. I was the one, along with you, Paul, that pulled up the FDA letter and looked at a very weak response from the Axona people, and they've had essentially up till now to come back with a definitive position on what their product is all about, and so far that has not come out, and it's not in any of the federal records for the FDA.
So they'll rebrand it under another name?
Well, whether they try and rebrand it under another name, essentially the product, until proven as a drug, proven as a medical food, I mean, the only thing I can imagine they could do is call it a supplement, all right, which sometimes does not have to come through the testing that we normally see by the FDA. And so I just want people to be aware. It's not so much that the specific product, but it's an example of what happens in a day and age where diseases like Alzheimer's that cause such fear in people because we haven't found anything yet that's a cure or even that slows it down. But yet, organizations and people like this are preying on victims of Alzheimer's in a way that's absolutely unconscionable, and I'm really glad to see that the FDA finally took them to task.
When people are desperate, they reach out for desperate cures and desperate answers. And
right. And, you know, if they truly had a product that worked, the world would be beating a path to their door, and they would be reaping billions. And so you have to be very, very careful about what you see and what you believe. And just as a carry-on to that, very recently, you know, we've been seeing so much in the news and worldwide about hepatitis C, which has really become epidemic. And one of the big drug companies, which I won't mention, has really come up with what appears to be a cure for it.
David, for our listening audience, what is hepatitis?
Hepatitis is a disease affecting the liver. There's hepatitis A, there's hepatitis B, and hepatitis C is usually the most inflammatory to your liver. It's transmissible. We could almost put it on the same parallel as HIV, human immunovirus, all right? Or better known as AIDS. But hepatitis is not AIDS, but it is communicable, and it can rest dormant for many, many years and then cause not only cirrhosis, but at the same time potentially cause liver cancer and cause people to
And there is no cure.
And there is no cure until now. But the problem is that the drug takes an 84-day course, seven days a week times 12 weeks, 84 days, at $1,000 a pill. So we don't know who's going to be able to pay for it, but not the drug company. Paul, I know we got off to a running start here, but we've got to take a break.
Great.
And so let's go. This is WBZT, 12:30 a.m., and we're going to a station break.
Are you a family caregiver? Are you taking care of a spouse, parent, or loved one who can no longer care for him or herself? Are you dealing with Alzheimer's disease and don't know what to do? Are you feeling burned out, stressed, frustrated, and you just don't know where to turn? You've tried doctors, you've tried lawyers and mental health professionals, but now realize they don't have realistic, practical answers. What you need is an expert non-clinical family caregiver, one with 25 years of active experience helping thousands of family caregivers like yourself. One who can help you provide a better quality of life for yourself and your loved one. His name is David Levy, and you can reach him at dlevy@caregivered.org. Caregiver ED is one word. Or call direct to 561-482-0086. That's 561-482-0086. This is Caregiver Reality with gerontologist David Levy. You can call in to speak with David on air, toll-free, at 1-800-889-0267. That's 1-800-889-0267. Again, here's David Levy and more of today's Caregiver Reality.
And I only had about 35 minutes. I was looking at people, and nobody was moving, and I didn't know whether or not they had their ears clogged or whatever, but they were almost expressionless. And so when I got towards the end and I said, anybody have a question, a lot of hands went up, and I said, well, we really don't have the time. But one of the people turned around and said, I have never heard that. I had no idea about caregivers and the dilemma that they're in, and that they don't have any education. I said, well, remember, you come from the service field. You're used to dealing with the patient. My focus is the caregiver. And so while I'm respectful of the patient, clinically, I don't have anything to add to the equation. I'm about the caregiver and the practical problem solving. And one of the things that I related to them, and I did this morning as well, so pardon me if I'm being redundant. I'm doing it more for the camera and everybody else here to bring them up to speed. Day before yesterday, there's a publication that comes out called Gerontologist, which is for gerontologists, and those that are interested. And they did a study out of Boston University where they took 16 healthcare professionals who were geriatric specialists or dealing with the aging market, but they were also doing caregiving for a parent. No spousal caregiving, strictly child-parent. This is David Levy. We're back, and what you were listening to was a piece of a clip that I had done for a support group, and right there at the end, it started to talk about a study that appeared very recently in the Journal of Gerontologists. And what it did is it discussed the fact, and it was done out of Boston University, and Paul, you and I have talked about this on a number of occasions. What they did is they took 16 geriatric clinical professionals who were dealing with personal caregiving for a spouse, and they followed them over a year's time to see how well a geriatric clinical professional would do with family caregiving. And I will tell you that the results that came out were that they were just as confused, just as burned out, just as frustrated, and equally as emotionally involved as any of our listeners or you and I involved in our personal family caregiving. And so I want the audience to know, I want the world to know that even if you're a doctor, even if you're a clinical psychologist, even if you're a geriatric case manager, and you understand clinically what's going on, when it's your loved one, your mom, your dad, your spouse, you are just as involved in the system and what isn't working as anybody else. And one of the things that the doctors didn't like, or the clinicians that were involved in this, was coming back into the system like the rest of us from the other direction. They're used to sitting where they are and having a patient or somebody come to them. When they had to come in the other way, they were just as confused, just as confounded, and just as frustrated as any of us would be.
Well, the system is so difficult to navigate. And if you add the frustration and the difficulties of the care of the loved one, and I assume they were still in practice at the time.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So they're working full-time, they have families of their own, and they're trying to get things done, as all of us are as family caregivers. It is frustrating and it is hard, and as you say so often, caregiving is not a disease.
No, it isn't, and that was what the initial front end of that piece was. We cut into the clip a little, and when I said I never knew that, I was referring to others that had listened to some of that and didn't realize that what we do in family caregiving has nothing to do with the clinical side. As we've been updating the manual, I'm more convinced than ever that family caregiving really is 15% clinical knowledge and 85% practical problem solving, and nothing has changed in the years since we wrote it and in the 25 years that I've been involved in it.
I think what the clip really shows is that the floor is not level and it's constantly moving.
Absolutely. The healthcare system is morphing. The facility system is morphing. Later on, we might discuss, there was a big report out today on nursing homes from the Inspector General from Health and Human Services that Medicare commented on. We find that more and more people in an aging world, in a time when chronic illness is rampant, with diseases just like Alzheimer's that we haven't been able to find cures for, or even others like Parkinson's and multiple sclerosis, where there's been some headway, but certainly not a cure or a resolution to what's going on. People really have their job cut out for them. And just as we've said time and time again, the family caregiver is the backbone and the front line of health care, not only in the United States, but in the world. And if they weren't there, the healthcare system would collapse, because there's no way to substitute out the 50 to 60 million people that are doing family caregiving in this country, provide them with facilities if they couldn't be home, or to find people to go into their homes that could do what family caregivers do day after week after month.
I think what is so telling in that clip is that, so what do we do while we're waiting for the cure? And we go to the professionals that they have the answer, and they themselves are struggling with the loved ones that they're taking care of.
Well, as we've said time and time again, I'm waiting for a call from one of the clinical professionals to tell me what courses they took when they were coming up in college, graduate school, medical school, on family caregiving. So you can't expect them to be able to help and guide family caregivers if they've never had any training in it. It's no more intuitive for them than it is for any other individual that's doing family caregiving.
And the irony of it is, you can go into any bookstore and there are shelves and shelves that talk about how I took care of my mother, or some aspect of caregiving that is specific to that person. And as we know, and as our audience is learning, you've seen one case of caregiving, finish it.
Right, you've seen one case of caregiving, you've seen one case of caregiving. And while taking nothing away from the authors of those books, and there's a lot of celebrity attached to it, what they did for their mother, their father, or their spouse was unique to their set of circumstances, finances, geography, family dynamics, et cetera, et cetera. And so what they did may not be able to approach what you can do. And your circumstance, while it may be a similar disease, may have none of the other underpinnings that allow you to do what they did. And so we have to be very careful where our authorities come from and what they're really saying. And they're telling you what they did, all right, as opposed to showing you how do you approach family caregiving. What are the essential elements, and how do you build a plan? And that's what the Practical Problem Solving Manual is all about. We don't tell you what to do. We tell you what it is that you need to be aware of, how to find it, what to look for. It's not a book of lists telling you what you ought to do. It's showing you and explaining to you where the body of knowledge that you need in order to be able, as I continually say, and you and I both say it, Paul, in order to know what your options are so you can make wiser decisions, so that what you did at the time you had to do it, you can at least have the peace of mind you did the best you
And
could.
sometimes the choices are all bad choices. So it's choosing the best.
Of the bad.
Yeah, basically.
But if that's the best you could do with what you had, then you at least have to take the comfort that you couldn't do anymore. But if you did something that you thought was wrong and you didn't understand all your options, then as a caregiver, you're going to beat yourself up. You're going to be loaded with guilt, resentment, and anger. But yet you don't know how well you really did if you didn't know what it was that you needed to do by understanding what the alternatives are.
And we set the bar so high for ourselves. We almost build in failure.
Well, it is, because there's no one to rate family caregiving. There's nobody to say, you did a wonderful job, you did a terrible job, even though families and outsiders many, many times are willing to lob in comments about what you're doing, how well you're doing it, and what they would do if they were doing it, but they don't come down and do it, or they don't step in and do it.
I propose the David Levy scale of caregiving. Maybe that's what we need to create, David.
Well, I'm not sure that even I could create a scale of family caregiving, because it's also unique. And many times, great caregiving is getting through the day.
Or the hour.
Or the hour. And so whatever it takes to get you through the day or the hour is great. And all the little techniques and tips and things that we help people to understand in building that body of knowledge and education about how we're going to approach caregiving. And if we put all the essentials together and we begin to write our little story so that it's explainable to us in our own language, at our own time, and our own speed, that's what the manual was all about. That's what 26 years of caregiving now has taught me. It's that you need to be able to have that unique set of skills to deal with your level of caregiving, and it is not the skill set that we've grown up with.
And supplement that by the sum total of all of the support groups that I know you have facilitated, and some of which are archived on caregiverreality.com. There's a plethora, or a wide selection of knowledge that is there that people can go to sort of look for some answers when they themselves are stumped.
Exactly, and we don't have every answer, because there are some things that aren't answerable. But if you understand what it is that you need to consider, then the answer is the best that you can do with what you know. And because nobody trained you. And as I've said, we say it week after week. We have 50 to 60 million caregivers out there that essentially are reinventing the wheel for themselves every day. It's very inefficient. The assumptions of the formal healthcare system that they can just stick the informal family caregiver with anything that they don't want to do, all right, is a very broad overreach of what I think that we're all about in this country and worldwide. We need to understand that we are relying upon the American family caregiver to such a degree that, as we've said before, at $10 an hour, which is the way we calculate it, it's worth more than $500 billion today and growing.
And the tide is
and where would we find it?
And the tide is just starting to come in.
Right. And so to the American family caregiver out there, we salute you. We recognize you. We're trying to support you because we understand what a difficult and strange job it is to all of a sudden be employed in a role that you have no preparation for.
And you're not alone.
Oh, gosh, no. With 50 or 60 million people doing it, how could we ever think that we're alone? But you know what? Caregivers don't really have an effective way of communicating. Yes, support groups are great, and there's some things on the internet, but just like we discussed earlier about that Axona, you have to be very, very careful with the internet, because there are plenty of people out there that have their own agenda, and it's not objective. And many, many times, even in good chat groups, you have people exchanging what they did. And it's really the equivalent of, once again, writing the book. But there are times that third-party observation about what somebody else is going through can be terribly helpful. And so I take nothing away from it, but I say to everyone involved, just be careful about where you seek your information from and whose authority does it come from.
Getting back to the internet for a second, great for information, not so good for knowledge, and certainly very little wisdom.
Well, I think that's true, but once again, you're dealing in a subject called family caregiving that is first really coming to light. We've known about it for 30 years. I've been involved in it, for pretty close from whence it got started. Not that we haven't always had family caregiving,
Right.
but to the extent that we do today and the reliance upon it. And what people need to understand is that the clinical system can only do what it's trained to do. And that's why when I tell people there's a bright blue line between what we do for the caregiver and what the clinical system does for the patient are two entirely different things. And we take no umbrage whatsoever with what the clinical side needs to do. I applaud them, the medical research that we're collaborating with. If we don't have that, we're never going to make forward progress. But in the meantime, just as you said, while we're waiting for a cure, we have to do something to support the caregiver to make their quality of life and the quality of life and dignity for the person that they're taking care of something that we can look at and say, we did the best we could.
And that really is so important, that quality of life and dignity for the one that we're caring for. That really is the yardstick.
Yes, it is. And to say that because somebody is sick or somebody has cognitive mental impairment like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, dementia, or whatever it may be, that just because they can't communicate or do things the way they used to, that there's any less of a person there, even though they may be physically restricted or mentally restricted. They are a human being, and they're entitled to the dignity that they as a human being deserve. And we have to treat them that way. The caregiver has to recognize it for what it is, and it's so very important. It's the key to caregiving.
And we may be having a bad day, but we can't transmit that bad day onto the one that we're caring for.
No, and a matter of fact, there are a number of studies out that specifically say that a caregiver who understands what they're doing and stays calm, especially with a dementia patient, enhances the well-being of that dementia patient, because they may not be able to understand the anxiety and the angst that the caregiver is going through, but it transmits, it radiates. And so an educated caregiver does a much better job of helping the one they love and taking care of, because they're calmer, they have a better direction, and they have a better concept of what it is they have to do. It's about 20 of 8. Why don't we take a break? You're listening to us on WBZT, 1230 AM, iHeartRadio, caregiverreality.com. And if you want to speak to us, 800-899-0267. That's 889-0267 at the 1-800. We'll take a break.
Where are we going?
Are you a family caregiver? Are you taking care of a spouse, parent, or loved one who can no longer care for him or herself? Are you dealing with Alzheimer's disease and don't know what to do? Are you feeling burned out, stressed, frustrated, and you just don't know where to turn? You've tried doctors, you've tried lawyers and mental health professionals, but now realize they don't have realistic, practical answers. What you need is an expert non-clinical family caregiver, one with 25 years of active experience helping thousands of family caregivers like yourself. One who can help you provide a better quality of life for yourself and your loved one. His name is David Levy, and you can reach him at dlevy@caregivered.org. Caregiver ED is one word. Or call direct to 561-482-0086. That's 561-482-0086. To contact David Levy directly after the show, go online to info@caregiverreality.com. And remember, caregiver is one word. Now here's more of today's program, Caregiver Reality.
And welcome back, everyone, to Caregiver Reality. We're glad that you joined us this evening. David, I understand a very important study was released today by the Inspector General for Medicare, which is quite a credential.
Right.
Can you give us a little bit of the background, and what did this report actually tell us?
Well, this was the Inspector General for Health and Human Services, which is not the Center for Medicare and Medicaid, although the Center for Medicare and Medicaid, but it had to do essentially with taking a look at the skilled nursing facilities that we have around the country.
Define that, please.
Well, a skilled nursing facility is a licensed facility. We typically call it a nursing home.
Okay.
And it is a step underneath a hospital and a step above assisted living or other forms of facility where somebody might go, including physical therapy. You can have that done at skilled nursing, but there are also facilities that stand on their own. But that's not really the point. We all know what a nursing home is or what our expectation, and many of us have said and promised our loved one we would never put them in there, and we really try and keep them at home and do the best we can. But the headline today that really kind of makes it all come home was 1/3 of skilled nursing patients are harmed in their treatment in the nursing home. This was the study that was done, and they said that they looked at it in a single month, and they followed about 650 nursing home patients in 600 facilities. So basically, they had one patient that they were following in numerous facilities. Now remember, we only have about 1,550,000 nursing home beds left in this country, because with Medicaid squeezing them and with people really having a difficulty affording it, because nursing homes these days are $10,000 a month and up. And I want to remind our audience, Medicare doesn't pay for it. The only thing that Medicare will pay for in a nursing home is following at least a 72-hour stay in a hospital, which includes 2 midnights. You can be discharged to a skilled nursing facility for rehabilitation following a stroke, surgery, whatever it may be, if you're over the age of 65 and Medicare is paying for it. I'm not getting into Social Security disability at this particular point. Anyway, they followed these 655 patients in 600 facilities for a month. And in that month, there were 22,000 patients that were injured, either by medication, falling, what have you, and additionally, 1,500 died in a single month.
Wow.
Now, here's the thing I think that we have to be very cognizant of. So if you add it up, it's about 23, maybe 24, 25,000 patients a month. And if you multiply that by a year, it's 300,000 patients across 1.5 million or 1.6 million nursing home beds. So you begin to get an idea of just how acute this predicament is. And it's not that the nursing home doesn't want to do a good job. They're being squeezed. They're having difficulty finding the quality of people that they want. I've been following a number of my clients in the nursing home lately, and some very good ones. And let me tell you, even though they have great people, when 35 people ring the bell at the same time, they don't have 35 people to go. And then what happens is individuals say, I'm being neglected, I'm being overlooked. But they all have a job to do. And it's not easy to get around in a typical nursing home that has 80 to 120 people in it. Some are larger, but most are smaller. And so one of the things that we have to be very careful of and recognize is that substandard treatment and inadequate monitoring and delays or failure to provide needed care, which is what this study cited, happen in nursing homes around the country no matter how good they are, no matter how hard they try and prevent it. And Medicare is going to start to crack down. And as we come into more managed Medicaid, where we have the same thing as managed care or Medicare Advantage as we have now beginning to grow in Medicaid, they have to make a buck, these managed organizations, and they're squeezing the nursing homes. And the more you squeeze and take their bottom line away, there's less that they can do effectively. They can't hire more people with less money. They can't do the substantial training that they would like their people to have with less people to train and less trainers to be able to afford. So this is a growing problem. And one of the people that was cited in the study was a gentleman by the name of Richard Mallow, who is the executive director of New York's Long-Term Care Community Coalition, which is a pretty large organization recognizing what these long-term and facilities are like, these nursing homes. And he said when he looked at the report regarding medication error, bed sores, and falls, he was flabbergasted. But the way they ended the report with his comment was, referring to nursing homes, they are dangerous, dangerous places. And this is coming from somebody who deals with nursing homes every day. I don't want to scare people to the extent that they're fearful of a nursing home, but what I need to tell people is that whoever your loved one is, whoever your caregiver is, has to be a great advocate for you in a nursing home. You just can't place somebody in a nursing home and expect them, because they're recovering from something or they're there as a long-term chronic care patient, that they can fend for themselves. And as we often say, just because they went from home or the hospital to the nursing home, just because we changed the roof, didn't change the role and responsibility of a family caregiver. It just makes them more of an advocate, and now they need to learn an additional skill set, how to deal with long-term facility, their rules, their regulations, their strengths, and their shortfalls. And at the same time, they need to manage their expectations about what a nursing home can and cannot do in March of 2014. And so it's something that we all have to recognize, because nursing homes are still an essential part of healthcare. But we also have to realize that they can't do everything on their own. And that more and more, just as we rely on the family at home, we're going to have to rely on family to be more involved when we have a loved one in a nursing home, because there just isn't enough. And there are things that the caregiver can do without having been trained clinically as an RN, an LPN, or even a certified nursing aide.
You got to ask questions.
Not only do you have to ask questions, but you have to be an effective squeaky wheel. Now, when I say squeaky wheel, because it gets the oil, but you can't be a pain in the ass, because respectfully, you're going to get pushed back. And the last thing that you want to do is have your loved one be kind of, I don't say that anybody's going to go in and hurt them, but you don't want them to be further ignored when they need assistance, because they've decided that the family is a nuisance, and, you know, no matter what they can do, meaning the nursing home, the family's not going to be happy. You have to be realistic. You have to be cheerful, even though it's a difficult situation. And you have to remember please and thank you, because remember, the people that work in nursing homes are really no different than you and I. And we don't know whether or not they left a loved one at home for home care, whether or not they've had a bad day, whether they've just been through a bankruptcy. We have no idea. They're just human beings, all right, except they have a skill set that allows them to work and be licensed to do things in a nursing home. But they're not magicians, and they're not bigger than life. And we have to recognize that they are what they are, and not to expect them to be bigger than life.
And the situation is going to grow in proportions.
Oh, well,
just based upon numbers.
Right. Well, we're seeing more and more admits for difficult situations to hospitals, but as various healthcare, and especially Medicare Advantage and other reimbursement organizations, start to squeeze and try and get, you know, more effective, less dollar care, what's happening is they're coming out of hospitals quicker and sicker. And so either they're being taken home, which puts an extra burden on the caregiver, or they're being put in skilled nursing facilities, such as the kind we've been talking about, and they're being maximized to the limit in terms of what they can do with who they have.
And they're lucky if they find a bed.
Well, beds are another thing. Well, so far it hasn't been too difficult to find the immediate post-hospital rehab bed, and one of the reasons is because Medicare, to the extent that they reimburse for skilled nursing care after a hospital, is at a usual and customary rate. It's when you go in long-term, you've got to be there for Medicaid, or after the 20 days that Medicare allows you, when it starts to become an 80-20, Medicare pays 80, you got to pay 20. Right. It's a question of what you can afford and what you can do. So many times that'll have to push a patient out sooner than you might want them to be able to leave because they can't afford the copay.
I would think that there are going to be more and more of these type of studies with similar results.
Well, I think that all we can do is keep identifying the problem. But, you know, one of the long-term, and you know it, Paul, we've all been in business. If you're going to come with a problem, please come with a solution. Just instead of dumping the problem on us, what is it that we can do to try and improve? And one of the things that we have to realize, that money buys care, whether it's coming from the federal government, the state government, the insurance companies, or out of your own pocket. And you have to be able to direct your dollars as effectively as those organizations are trying to do theirs. The only difference is you have your own bottom line, but you don't have shareholders to account to. And most of the private insurers and Medicare Advantage and Medicaid option providers have accountability on the bottom line as well as accountability for care.
A linchpin for creating a care plan for your family, for your loved ones.
It's essential. If you don't know what you're walking into, you cannot protect yourself or somebody else. It's like walking into a jungle and not knowing what beasts are on either side or what diseases or whether the pond is infected with typhoid. It's a whole mysterious place out there called the healthcare system in 2014. The more you know about it, the more you're able to deal with the things that come up. And when you have the role and responsibility of family caregiver, that's a big responsibility, especially when you have a family to maintain, a job to do, and others that look to you for advice, assistance, and dollars. Not easy. And you and I know it. We're doing it ourselves.
Yes, we are.
And I'm getting ready tomorrow to go see the surgeon with my wife, because next week at this time, while I'm on the air with you, hopefully, and my wife will be about 4 hours out of a total knee replacement. And if you think I'm not concerned about that, I am, as well as the fact that she has all of the other complications of the other situations that she has. So I'm not looking forward to this. I'm preparing as best I can, emotionally, practically. I've made arrangements for where hopefully she'll be able to go following the hospital. And I think it's a quality facility. I've gone. I've introduced myself to the administrator. She knows who I am. I know who she is. I've talked to the nurses. I've alerted them to what my wife's issues are. And we're going to try and make that transition as easy as possible. Once we're done there, bringing her home, keeping up physical therapy, and managing. I expect to be wearing my full housewife hat following her discharge from the nursing home.
Caregiving.
And all 4 dogs
just keeps continuing.
Right, and all 4 of my dogs know that they have to be accountable. They're the accountable care when I'm not there.
Yep.
All right. So, anyway, to our audience out there, these are problems that everybody's going through. Paul, myself, you, and as we see when we read in the paper, read these studies, listen, the world is going through this. And he who is best prepared manages somehow to do a little bit better than those who do it off the seat of their pants. Now, tomorrow, if any of you are in the Del Rey area, We'll be doing and Paul will be with me, we'll be doing a caregiver support group at a place called Grand Villa. It's on West Atlantic Avenue on Via Flora. Turn into Grand Villa, and on the left is their memory clinic. You don't have to be dealing as a caregiver with a memory issue, but that's where we meet, and the coffee's good, and the Danish is okay.
And that's 9:30 tomorrow.
And that's 9:30 tomorrow till 11:30, and you're more than welcome if you're in our listening audience to attend. These sessions are open. They're objective. We have a lot of people with a lot of knowledge that are willing to help you go down the path and figure out what it is that you have to do. Good support group is not judgmental. There's a great degree of confidentiality. There's a feeling that you're part of family, and whatever you may have experienced prior, even if you didn't go to what I would call a successful support group, not being egotistical, but try one of ours. We got 25 years of experience doing it, and we must be doing something right because they're full, they're growing, and the demand for us to do it further, and it's no different than the medical research charities who came to us and said, how can you help us with caregiving? And there's nothing that will give us greater pleasure than to be able to take a whole variety of diseases and let those research organizations do what they have to do while we try and help the caregiver deal with the problem until a cure is found.
Again, tomorrow, 9:30, Grand Villa.
Right.
Come and join us.
Yep. I think you'll find it to be a unique experience for you as a caregiver, and one that I think you will find beneficial. And once you start, usually people don't stop. They come a few times, they don't say anything, they listen, they begin to learn. All of a sudden the frown turns to a little bit of a smile, and then they become part of the group, and they look forward to that Wednesday or whatever the day happens to be, because it's their day. It's focused on them. It's the family caregivers' 2 hours to really let it all hang out and be the center and the focus of attention rather than being the forgotten soul in the care problem.
Well, so important because they need an outlet, and this is the place to get that help.
Right, and and I must tell you that after a long, arduous weekend, we have finally gotten the entire manual Kindle ready. The only thing we're doing now is trying to figure out a cover design that won't be bleh when you go to Kindle, and at least will distinguish itself to some degree. And
when is that going to be out?
that should be out. It goes to Kindle at the end of this week for them to review it. And as long as we kind of pass muster, that it should be out very, very quickly after that. And at the same time, we'll be producing the hard copy, which will be available on the caregiverreality.com website for those of you that want something a little bit bigger than your Kindle reader to be able to work. And all of the plan outlines are there, and you can fill it in much more easily than you can on the Kindle version. But the Kindle version has all the knowledge that we've put together over many, many years. Paul, I want to thank you. I think this show has been very informative tonight. I'm glad to see you're on the mend from your eye. And to the family caregivers out there, and to the people that we speak to every week, you're the reason we're here. Our mission, as you know, is to help the caregiver. But for Paul and I, it's a passion. We go after it in a way that we really hope the sincerity and the passion comes through over the microphone, because we want to help. We want to be part of the solution. So, South Florida, America, and the world, good night. We'll see you next Tuesday. And to you caregivers, good luck.
Take care.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Reality. Each week, David Levy, a gerontologist with over 25 years of experience providing practical, realistic help to caregivers struggling to keep up with the needs of a loved one unable to care for him or herself. To reach David Levy online, go to info@caregiverreality.com. See you next week on Caregiver Reality.
News, traffic, weather, every 10 minutes from 6 a.m. until 3 p.m. 1230 WBCT.
West Palm Beach.